What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back. And as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel, and today I'm here to give my 53-man roster prediction for the Green Bay Packers before their first preseason game against the Cincinnati Bengals on Friday night. But first, give me a follow on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. You can find all my work over at Dairyland Express, as well as Packers Wire. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. So we'll dive into my roster prediction here in a second. First, I just want to say this is how I feel things stand based on what I've seen at the training camp practices that have taken place so far, including family night at Lambeau Field. There's obviously a lot that can and will change in terms of the weighting of these final decisions. You know that that stuff's still upcoming. There's two more joint practices against the Patriots next week. There's still 3 full preseason games to play. The stuff that carries the most weight in terms of making these final decisions has not happened yet. So want to add that caveat right out the gate here. But again, this is how I feel things stand based on what I've seen up to this point. So we'll start with the quarterbacks. My 2 quarterbacks, Jordan Love and Sean Clifford. Before they released Danny Etling, I did see a path to there being 3 quarterbacks on this roster because I don't see them releasing Sean Clifford. They spent a 5th-round pick on him. They've spoken very highly. They knew that leaning on a day 3 rookie to be the backup was going to come with ups and downs. I just didn't see a path to them releasing Clifford and then trying to sign him onto the practice squad. So if they still had Danny Etling, for example, and he was going to be the number 2, I could have seen a path to keeping Sean Clifford as the 3rd. But with Danny Etling released, this is Sean Clifford's job. He's going to be the backup. Alex Magoo is going to be on the practice squad. So 2 quarterbacks, Jordan Love and Sean Clifford. Running back, kept 3, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, and Tyler Goodson. This was a difficult decision. We know Tyler Goodson, Patrick Taylor, Lou Nichols are all competing for that 3rd running back role. Both Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur spoke last week about how important special teams play, blocking abilities, and reliability as a pass catcher is going to be in determining who wins that battle. From a special teams perspective, edge goes to Patrick Taylor. That's a big reason why he was on the 53-man roster for most of last season. I'm still waiting to see what role Goodson's going to carve out in that capacity. Lou Nichols has missed a couple practices, and he comes to the NFL from Central Michigan with only 2 career special team snaps in college. Of course, that doesn't mean he can't become a core contributor here in the NFL, but from an experience standpoint, as a rookie, it's worth monitoring. Nichols has also battled some drop passes as well as a pass catcher, has looked very good as a ball carrier, however. So in making this decision, it came down to Taylor or Goodson. Ultimately, I went with Tyler Goodson, even though Patrick Taylor may, at least at this point, based on what I've seen, be the more solid special teams contributor. Reason being, I think Goodson can carve out a role on this offense. He's not going to be used a ton as a traditional running back. None of these guys are, because the Packers have Aaron Jones. They have A.J. Dillon. If healthy, those guys are going to be taking pretty much all the snaps. But Goodson can compete in that gadget role. And that's how we've seen him utilized quite a bit, lining up in the backfield, the slot, out wide, catching passes, a ball carrier, used on end arounds, a motion man, jet sweeps. I think that's the roles I've talked about on here before that we're going to see more of with Jordan Love at quarterback because of all the added benefits it can provide in offense. Some big play potential. You get a playmaker, the ball in his hand in space. There's the opportunity for big plays, but also just the additional, eye candy, the layer of complexity it can add for a defense with the late decisions or changes that they have to make. And in making those adjustments, it can show some tells to the quarterback and the offense about what type of play they're running. Any sort of hesitation, on those jet sweeps, on those end arounds. That's all it takes to that split second. All it takes to open up a passing lane for a blocker to get, to the second level or position better. There's a ton of benefits to it. And again, with a young quarterback, a young offense, that can help take some of the playmaking burden off of Jordan Love's shoulders, the young pass catcher. So that's why I think it's going to be a more prominent role. And Goodson so far has been used in that capacity, and we could potentially see him earn snaps on the offense for that in that role. So for that reason, that's why I gave him the edge. But again, as we're watching these special or preseason games, as you know, you're following along on Twitter on what's going on at training camp, keep in mind as to the reliability of these guys in pass protection and where they're playing on special teams. How many special team snaps are they getting? Are they with the first unit, the second unit? Because those are going to be key factors. At receiver, I kept just 5. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Maury Toure, Jaden Reed, and Dontavian Wicks. Bo Melton, Malik Heath, they've been coming on strong over this last week. Mentioned in yesterday's video, you know, Bo Melton brings the speed to the position, has made a lot of plays getting the ball in his hands quickly in space, where that 4.34 speed of his has some yak potential. He's also, again, with that speed, shown some ability to stretch the field. Malik Heath just seemingly, you know, has been making a play every practice or two, brings a different dynamic as a bigger, more physical receiver, as Matt LaFleur called him, measuring in at 6'2", 213 pounds. But ultimately, I went with just 5 receivers because I'm not sure the role that the 6 receiver is going to have. I see it being minimal at best and likely non-existent. Again, those 5 receivers I just mentioned are ahead of the 6th receiver on the depth chart. There's the 2 tight end sets we're going to see a lot of, the 2 running back sets we're going to see a lot of, the involvement of the running backs and tight ends in the passing game. Just don't see there being a role for that player. If Melton or DeBose or Malik Heath are going to earn it, a big reason why, again, is going to go back to their ability to contribute on special teams. And at least up until this point, I haven't seen enough of that for me to put any one of them on the roster. I felt that, again, because of such the small, non-existent role that this 6th receiver is going to play, basically a developmental year for them, that I could use that roster spot better elsewhere. So that's why I went with the 5 receivers mentioned. Tight end, it's about as easy as it gets. Luke Musgrave, Josiah DeGore, Tucker Kraft, and Tyler Davis. The only other tight end on the roster is Austin Allen, but he's going to be a practice squad player. Offensive line, I went heavy here. I kept 10. So there's the guys who we know are going to be on the roster. David Bakhtiari, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, John Runyon, Zach Tom, and Yash Nyman. That's 6 players right there. Oftentimes on the initial 53-man roster, the Packers have kept just 9. There was one point last season where they had even 11 offensive linemen on the 53-man roster. So that 7th spot, I did give to Royce Newman. I know he's had his struggles in the past, but he brings 2 elements that we know the Packers really covet on the offensive line. Experience. He started almost his entire rookie season. And versatility. You can put him at either guard position, and although not ideal, if you needed a right tackle, you can put him there as well. He has experience from his time in college and played a little there back in 2022 at the Packers as well. So I do think Royce Newman's going to be on this team. It's been guard with the second team offense. When Elton Jenkins was out, we saw Royce Newman get the start or play with the starting offense during family night. The next 2 spots I gave to the developmental offensive tackles, Rasheed Walker and Caleb Jones. Rasheed Walker's been the left tackle with the second offense pretty much all of training camp, and Caleb Jones has been the right tackle with the second team offense pretty much all of training camp. This is another developmental year for them. The reason I'm keeping both is because, again, we look forward to 2024. David Bakhtiari could be playing elsewhere. Yash Nyman's an unrestricted free agent, could be playing elsewhere. A position of strength right now, of depth, could all of a sudden have a ton of question marks. And so I think holding on to these guys and having them potentially compete next summer, again, there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall before we get to that point. But looking ahead at one of the most important positions in football, having a couple of options who have been in the system, the Matt LaFleur offense for at that time will be going into their 3rd NFL seasons, you know, I think can be valuable in having that competition there. So I decided to hold on to both of them. The 10th spot went to Sean Ryan, 3rd round pick last year, far from a roster lock, you know, in addition to his PED suspension last season. Before that point, you know, he was a healthy scratch on most game days. He wasn't even suiting up. So, you know, he was far from a roster lock, but he's been really, really steady here in training camp. In the individual drills where it's one-on-one against a defensive lineman, you know, he was 8-0 at one point in those matchups, and he's been consistently playing either the left or right guard position with the second team offense here in training camp. So I think that they hold on to him as well. Switching to the defensive side of the ball, this was one of the more difficult decisions. I went with 5 interior defensive linemen: Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Colby Wooden, and Carl Brooks. We know those 5 are going to be on the team. But what was difficult is I left off Jonathan Ford. Matt LaFleur's spoke highly of Ford, said he's really upped his game this season. And one of the biggest question marks on the team in general is, how is this defensive front going to hold up against the run? Because that's where the success of this defense is going to begin. Packers have to be better against the run. What Ford provides them is a secondary nose tackle option behind TJ Slayton to take on some of those snaps. However, the reason that I ended up keeping him off is because, one, he's still not going to see a ton of snaps. You really don't see 6 deep interior defensive line rotations. 4 is common. Sometimes you'll see 5. You're really not going to see 6. And if it's truly a down where the Packers have to stop the run, you're going to have TJ Slayton and Kenny Clark out there. So his role could be important, but it's also not going to be huge either. And we've seen really good play over the last week or so from both Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks that gave me the confidence to keep Ford off at this point. But again, he's someone to keep our eyes on. Edge rusher, Rashawn Gary's off the PUP list, so put him on here, obviously. Preston Smith, Justin Hollins, Lucas Van Ness, and JJ Enagbari. Those are my 5. The one or a couple questions, I guess, that we could have at this position is with Justin Hollins. From a salary cap perspective, he is not a roster lock. If the Packers were to move on from him, I think the dead cap hit they incur is about $155,000. Now, in the grand scheme of the NFL salary cap, that's a drop in the bucket. But he's seen a number of snaps with the starters. He was very good when he came to Green Bay last season against both the run and the pass, took on a leadership role in that edge rusher room, and he's playing some starting special team snaps as well. So not a roster lock, but just given how he's been utilized so far and where he's playing and how he's performed in the past, just have a really hard time seeing the Packers moving on from him. You'll notice I did not have Brenton Cox on the roster at this time. He's a very, very high upside undrafted rookie coming out of Florida, but he's been consistently all of training camp behind these 5. He's been playing with the third team defense, and I need to see a little more, consistency, more flashes from him before I'm going to get to the point where, I might take Justin Hollins off, because that could be a really interesting battle. The Packers are in a transition year with Jordan Love. Obviously their goal is to win games, but if it comes down to a 1-year, Hollins and a 1-year deal as a veteran, as the 4th or 5th edge rusher option, they might take a swing at keeping Brenton Cox and just, hoping that they connect on that upside moving forward. But again, have to see more from him, more consistency, more of those flashes than what has taken place so far. At linebacker, actually, unlike in many years past, there's a ton of stability here. Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker, they're going to be your guys taking the bulk of the snaps. Isaiah McDuffie, going back to late last year, has established himself as the Packers' 3rd linebacker option on defense. And then you have Eric Wilson, Tariq Carpenter, 2 core special teams players, along with Isaiah McDuffie. These 3 players were top 3 on the Packers and special teams tackles last year. So everybody just mentioned they have specific roles. They have defined roles that they're going to fill on this team. So I see the Packers going heavy and keeping 5 inside linebackers. On to cornerback. Eric Stokes, I did include him in this. If he starts, he's currently on the PUP list. If he begins week 1 on the PUP list, he does not count towards the 53-man roster, which would open up a roster spot. But I put him on here for the time being. And obviously that's subject to change based on what takes place over the next few weeks. But I have Eric Stokes, Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Corey Ballantyne. Pretty straightforward given what we've seen in training camp. Obviously, Alexander, Douglas, Nixon, Stokes are going to be on this team, going to see a ton of snaps. Valentine and Ballantyne, they've been the secondary options, or with the second defense on the boundary. That's where they've been all of training camp. Corey Ballantyne last season emerged as a core special teams player on this Packers team, so he can contribute in that capacity as well. Right now, with Stokes out, I think Ballantyne is the fourth cornerback option on the depth chart. During the Packers joint practice with Cincinnati on Wednesday, Jair, he was on the practice field but did not participate in team drills. So Carrington Valentine was playing with the ones, which I think says a lot about, his play up to this point and how the coaching staff feels about him. So that's who I have locked in right here as the 6 cornerback options for the Green Bay Packers. Safety, I kept 5. Darnell Savage, Rudy Ford, Jonathan Owens, Tavarius Moore, and Dallin Levitt. The first 4 players, Savage, Ford, Owens, and Moore, that's who's made up the Packers' first and second team defenses at the position. Darnell Savage and Rudy Ford were the starters for all of offseason programs and the start of training camp. We've since seen Jonathan Owens in for Rudy Ford, still starting next to Savage, but Ford and Moore have been with the second team defense. So those 4 right now seem very much solidified. I did keep Dallin Levitt at this point. He's not someone that we're going to see step on the field on defense. So I do question, is his special teams ability and what the Packers get in that capacity enough to roster over, say, Ennis Gaines, who we know can contribute in a variety of ways, or instead of Anthony Johnson, a recent draft pick this year of the Green Bay Packers. So something to keep our eyes on. And it's worth noting that Wes Hodkiewicz of Packers.com tweeted out that during the joint practice, in that protection role on the punt coverage unit, a role that Dallin Levitt often fills, we saw Jonathan Owens taking snaps there. So for the time being, I did keep Levitt there. Again, his special teams experience. He's played his entire career under Rich Bisaccia. Aaron Rodgers last season spoke highly of just his locker room presence that he brings, which obviously can be very valuable with such a young team. But something to watch. Can Ennis Gaines, who I left off of this roster or this roster prediction, but he's someone who has a path to contribute. He can be the backup nickel to Keyshawn Nixon. If the Packers get in a pinch at safety, he can take those traditional deep safety snaps. And he was a core special teams player last year and is currently starting on a few of the special teams units here in training camp. So he's someone to watch that could leapfrog down Levitt on this roster prediction. And then Anthony Johnson, an exciting player, can fill the Adrian Amos-like role, filling gaps, playing down in the box, helping out against the run. And I've seen some of those flash plays from him in that capacity, which is obviously really exciting. But it's important to keep in mind that he's a 7th-round pick who is only in his second season playing the safety position. His first 4 years at Iowa State came as a boundary corner. So not only is he making the jump from college to the NFL, but he's also still in the midst of learning what to him is a relatively new position. And throughout OTAs, throughout training camp, he's been solidified with that third team defense. So very possible that this is a developmental year for Johnson, and he could end up on the practice squad. Lastly, special teams, Anders Carlson, he's the only kicker on the roster. We know the Packers seem pretty prepared to weather whatever ups and downs may come with relying on a rookie. Matt Orchek at long snapper, rostered him over Broughton Hatcher, who's an undrafted rookie. Orchek won a Super Bowl with the Rams, has plenty of NFL experience and obviously big game experience, and the Packers signed him to a 3-year deal. Not that it's difficult to get out of a long snapper's contract, but there's obviously a level of commitment there. So have Matt Orchek as the long snapper, and then to have Pat O'Donnell on the roster as the punter over Daniel Whelan. Talked about this before. Whelan packs a lot of power, but there's more that goes into this role, specifically as the holder. Right now, as Carlson goes through his field goal attempts in practice, O'Donnell and Whelan are alternating who the holder is. But with a rookie kicker, if Whelan were to be the punter, a rookie holder, it's just a lot of risk right now for a team that probably, at least early on, isn't going to put up a ton of points. Points always matter, but they feel like they might really be at a premium this year where making your extra points, capitalizing on your field goal opportunities are going to be an absolute must, because you may not have, again, at least right away, the offensive firepower to overcome some of those miscues. So for the time being, until we see more, I'm going to go with the reliable option that we know of, the known option, I should say, in Pat O'Donnell over Daniel Whelan. But I'll add this last tidbit. It is very much a competition that's taken place between those two, more real than what I thought it was going to be coming into training camp. So there you have it, my friends. That is my current 53-man roster prediction before the Green Bay Packers take on the Bengals in their first preseason game. As always, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel, and you can find all my work over at Dairyland Express as well as Packers Wire. So until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack Go.